sure if we would get many people, given that the email went out a little late. So I'm glad to see that people got the email and they were able to join us today. Obviously, this is a training session on read-alongs, and if you did read the email, then you saw that this is just the first in a two-part training session, and so let me see. Let's hopefully this will. Oops, I guess I need to click a little. There we go. Um, in this first part, I don't know, does this actually, I just realized with this sidebar for the GoToMeeting, can everyone see, is everyone also seeing the sidebar and not seeing the full slide?
On my screen, I see the full slide along with my GoToMeeting.
Okay, so so I don't need to adjust anything, right?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. Perfect. Um, so in this first part, we'll be covering the basics and actually spend quite a bit of time looking at how to choose a record and why it can be so difficult just to choose a record type should become apparent as we work through various examples. We'll also talk about what needs to be included in a read-along record. Some of the things that need to be included are actually quite simple to verify and add, but there are other elements like fixed length data fields that can be a lot trickier. So stuff like that we're going to leave to part 2 of the training session. We thought it would be best if we broke the training into 2 parts, just because there are some things that get really complicated, and in particular understanding those fixed length data fields, so the 006, the 007, and the 008. And so in the next session, what we'll try and do is just break that down for you and also have some cheat sheets for you and show you how to create a 006 field. So let's see. So what can you expect to learn in this training? So most of our day-to-day cataloging, we don't actually spend much time thinking about what it is we're cataloging. That is, we have an item in front of us and it's either a book or a DVD or an audio book. But with read-alongs, we actually have to figure out what the item is. And until we figure out what the item is, we can't determine what kind of record we need to choose. So one thing that you'll learn in this session is how to evaluate items with multiple components in determining the record type. And if you're trying to import a record for a read-along, and some of you might have already been importing read-along records, one thing that you will notice is that if you actually open up each of the available records, you'll probably find that you have a choice of record types. And so, but then even though you might have a choice of different record types, when you actually look at the records for read-alongs, they're often incomplete. Even if in the physical description of the record, so in the 300 field, it may say that it's, for instance, 1 audio disc plus 1 book, or 1 volume plus 1 CD. The record may not include all of the encoded information to account for the various components of the item. So you may actually need to modify and create some of the fixed length data fields and some of the other items in the record. So in this training, you'll also learn about fixed length data fields, how they're coded, and what they tell us about the item being cataloged. And you'll also learn how to create fixed length data fields. So, what is a read-along? Let me first ask, how many of you have actually cataloged read-alongs before? I see that Lisa has. Jenny. So there is a question, would that be a book with a CD attached? And we'll get to that, right? Because what a read-along is, how we're actually defining a read-along will depend on how we're actually, what kind of records we're choosing. So it looks like there are some people who have familiarity with read-alongs, but maybe most of you haven't worked with read-alongs. As I said in the email, I'm glad those of you who haven't worked it with read-alongs are still here, because a lot of this stuff is important, and you don't necessarily get into understanding like the fixed length data fields if you haven't had to work with read-alongs and make choices about the record type that you're choosing. So let's go ahead and talk about what a read-along is. So basically, like, the most simple definition is that you've got a book and an audio recording of the book. And the audio recording is most typically a CD. Before, right, now it's a CD. Before, it was often a cassette or even a vinyl disc. A read-along can be fiction or nonfiction. It's usually a picture book, because it tends to be something that's designed to help early learners, and it's designed to help with both reading comprehension and listening skills. What a read-along is not is a book with a digital audio downlink. Very often, so there's a difference between, say, how a publisher might define a read-along, and that is an item that has text and sound recording that matches the text. But nowadays, right, we're seeing a lot of books that have a digital audio downlink. And in this case, we're not talking about that. We're talking specifically about items where there are multiple components, and in most cases, a book with a CD. We're not talking about playaways or Go readers. How many of you have worked with playaways and Go readers? Anyone? I think we do have some of those items in the catalog, generally with playaways and goaways. Go readers. They are these standalone devices, like MP3 players. So they're very different from the read-alongs that we're going to be cataloging. And then there's foreign language instruction material, which also can very often be in the format of a book and a CD. But with foreign language material, it's a lot more apparent just by the form of the item what kind of record it is. So for instance, right, you either have a book with a CD or you have an audio book, and there might be a little booklet inside. But generally with foreign language material, it is quite obvious what that item is. And of course, with foreign language instruction material, it's very often not that the sound recording matches exactly what's written in the book, or what the kind of the written text of the item. So with read-alongs, they're very much a book with a CD disc in there. And one of the things that makes them difficult to catalog is that you have these multiple components and this varied combination of components. So you can have texts in there, you can have songs, videos, activities, and it's not always apparent, as we had with some of these other items, like, for instance, the foreign language material, what exactly is the main component. Even though it may look like a book with an accompanying CD, what the item is in terms of its character may not quite match the kind of the physical characteristics of a book plus a CD. It may actually be that what we're looking at is a sound recording with an accompanying book. The other thing is that makes read-alongs very challenging to catalog is that there is the specific format, and that the fact that there have been format changes. So as I mentioned before, it was often a book with a cassette or a book with a vinyl disc. I think a lot of people may have already cataloged, if you have experience cataloging read-alongs, it was in the format of the book and the cassette. And previously, I think the recommendation of SAGE was to catalog those items as kits, very often because you also had to do a lot of repackaging. So there was a book and a cassette, and I think a lot of libraries ended up purchasing those plastic bags with handles on them. That's certainly what we did at Hood River. And we would put the components together, and then again, the recommendation was to catalog it as a kit. We're no longer recommending that read-alongs be cataloged as kits. One, in this new format of book plus CD, it's already prepackaged. It can get shelved as it is. The other thing is that technically with a kit, it should be 3 or more items, and those items should be different. So we have, in our discussions with the mentors, we've decided that we would like for catalogers not to use kit anymore, and we're going to work on doing some cleanup for the read-alongs that already exist in the catalog, but also then from now on to not be using kit as a record type for read-alongs. Now, because we're not using, like, as long as we were using kit, then it was easy to just say, well, okay, everything is a kit. But now that we're saying that we don't want you to catalog read-alongs as kit, it actually means that that you need to figure out what the item is. And as I just said, it can be confusing to figure out what the item is when you have multiple components. So is it a book with a sound recording? Is it a sound recording with a book? Is it a musical sound recording, or is it a non-musical sound recording? And these are all questions that you need to ask and that need to be answered before you can actually choose the record type for the read-along. So let's go ahead and run through the basic steps for importing records for read-along. So there are 3 steps. The first one is that you need to evaluate the item. The second step is choosing the record type to import. And then the third step will be to verify and edit any record elements. So step 1, evaluating the item. So you'll need to physically check the contents of both the book and the CD, right? Is there text, songs, music, activities, and then identify what the primary component is. And again, this is the tricky part. We'll go over a few examples in just a minute. And just to keep in mind that some read-alongs that you pick up are going to be pretty straightforward in identifying what the primary component is. But others can be quite challenging, and even the mentors, we have had a difficult time determining what the primary component is for certain items. And again, when we get to the examples, you'll see how tricky it can be. So the first thing that you want to think about is the book and are the book and the CD identical in content, or does one actually serve as more of a supplement to the other? Now, there's a general rule for cataloging read-alongs, and that is, all else being equal, the sound recording is generally considered the primary component, since the book is furnished so the user can read along while listening to the audio recording. So that means if the book and the CD contain the exact same material, you would then consider the sound recording as the primary component. And let me flip to the next slide. So the book and CD contain identical material. So we would say that the CD is the primary component. If the CD contains all the material that's in the book, plus any additional material, that can be songs or activities, then the CD, of course, is still the primary component. It's only when the book contains significantly more material than the CD that we would then say that the book is the primary component. Now, within that, we still have to make a decision as to whether it's there's musical sound recording or non-musical sound recording, right? It's easy if we make the determination that the book is the primary component, then we can go ahead and choose record type A. If we determine that the CD is the primary component, we still have to decide whether the sound recording is musical or non-musical, and that can actually be a little tricky. Again, we'll get to some examples and people can see how tricky that is. But the three primary record types that we'll be looking that you'll have a choice between is the type A record, a type I record, and a type J record. Again, there is what you might see if you're importing records is that you might have an option to choose the type O record. But as I said, at least as far as Sage is concerned, we're no longer recommending that you choose that type because technically a kit is only for 3 or more different components. So really we want to just concentrate on type A records, type I records, and type J records, okay? And just to make sure everyone is aware that if you're trying to figure out what record type it is, you need to look in that little box at the top of the record and to that first box, which is the record type. And in this case, we've got a record type A, so a book record. So just to have a little bit of a review here. So if the book and CD contain identical material, what type of record would you choose? Jenny has responded A. Lisa has said I. because the CD is the main component. Right, so we come back to that general rule, right? That if everything is the same, we still treat the sound recording as the primary component. And so in this case, the CD would be the primary component. And then, so that's as far as we've gotten CD as the primary component, but how do we know whether it's I or J, right? We still have that option. We still have to figure out whether it's a non-musical sound recording or a musical sound recording to determine whether we should be choosing a type I record or a type J record. So what about if the CD contains all material in the book plus additional material? What's the primary component here?
It's still going to be the CD.
Yeah.
But musical sound recording, if it has songs. Sorry, unmute.
Right, so CD is the primary component, and then again we need to figure out whether it's I or J, whether it's musical or non-musical, and then what kind of record type if the book contains significantly more material. Let's see, sorry, was there a question? I missed that, it disappeared. Let me open up the chat.
Well, hi, Anna. One of the things that I come up against that is exactly, I'm so happy to have this because these are my exact questions. Some of our books have songs with them, so then it automatically puts in the songs, but it's not actually extra material, so we can't use the little fixed fields box for extra material because it doesn't have like a script or a score. So I'm still going to say that I would stick with the non-musical sound recording type I, and then put in a 500 note, include songs.
And you're saying for the second one, CD contains all material in the book plus additional material. That's the one that you're talking about, right?
Exactly. It contains exactly identical material, but it has a couple of songs in it.
Right, and so, and we'll get to one of those examples, and it usually will be a record type I. Again, you know, this is that tricky one. Is the primary component really the non-musical part with the addition of a musical component, or is it really a musical sound recording kind of treated as text? But again, we'll come back to that with an example, okay? So so for this last one, the book contains significantly more material than the CD. What record type are we choosing with that one? I'm not getting any responses. I'll go ahead. So book, and then here we'll do, that one's the easy one where then it can be just the record type A. Okay. So let's, yes, now we can actually turn to some examples. So let's start with the record type A, because I think that tends to be a little bit more straightforward when we see that the book has significantly more content than the CD, and we're already leaning toward, okay, this looks more like a book type record than a sound recording type record. So here's an example. So it's a child's introduction to poetry. And the book, just to give you some background, the book discusses different types of poetry, highlights different poets, and offers examples. And the CD actually only contains the poetry verses, so the examples of verse. So here we have the cover of the item. Here's one page. Here's where they're, kind of providing that background, discussing different types of poetry, highlighting different poets. And then on this next page, we have the poem Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. So in this case, it's only Jabberwocky that you would find on the CD. Let's see if I can flip back. There we go. So all of this text that we're seeing here is not actually on the CD. We do have some indicators. Okay, here's where you play track 9, but we can already see here that the CD is quite limited in its contents compared to the book. So in this case, this seems like a fairly clear example of a book record where you would choose a type A. Were there any questions on that one? Did that seem clear to everyone?
Anna, did you see Jenny's question?
No, sorry. Let's see.
She's asking if you listened to the entire CD before you catalog.
No, didn't need to do that with this one. It was pretty clear from the CD itself. I'm trying to think if on the CD label, I think it actually just listed the tracks of the song. And when you open up the book, because as I said, if I can flip back to the, oops, sorry. Let's flip back one more. No, it's, oops, too many. Where it says like play track 9, it became very apparent that only the examples of poetry were included on the CD. So this was, this was a case where it was pretty clear without having to listen to the entire CD that only certain elements of what you were seeing in the book would actually be on the CD. Does that answer your question, Jenny? Okay, great. Okay, so the next example that we have is for a record type I, and this is Trapped, a Whale's Rescue. Here is an example where the book and the CD contain identical material. So this is a nonfiction picture book containing a story, and there is some supplemental information at the end of the book. And interestingly, even that supplemental information is contained or is included on the CD. And I think with this particular example, I did actually have to pop the CD in just to verify. Like, I think I just went to the end of the CD and saw that, oh, okay, that information was actually included on the CD. So here we have the cover. It just looks like kind of a regular picture book or non-fiction picture book. And here's then that supplemental information at the back of the book. So I think with this particular one, again, because everything, they're an exact match. That makes it really easy to be able to say, to invoke that general rule for read-alongs, that if all of the information or all of the contents are identical, then we go ahead and treat the sound recording as the primary component. And in this case, it's pretty clear that it's not musical. And so we can go ahead with record type I. So another example, okay, so here we have the scrambled states of America. And I'll let you take a look at some of the pages here and think about how you might classify this, whether you would see this as the book being the primary component or the sound recording being the primary component. So here's one of the first pages of the book. You can see that there's quite a bit of text. There is a little notation here, okay, turn the page. So there is that sense of, okay, this is definitely a read along because there's somebody telling you to turn the page. You'll see that there's, actually, let me flip to the next page where there's pages like this where there are kind of like little captions, little bits of text that's intermingled within the images. And one of the interesting things about this book is actually all of that text that you're seeing on the page right now, that is all included on the CD. I don't know how they, figured out the order of things, but they did. If you listen to the CD, it kind of starts in one corner and sometimes it doesn't quite make sense, but all of that text is actually included on the CD. Here we have, this is at the very end of the book. There are a couple of pages that list the states and just some kind of like factual information, right? The capital, square miles, population size. This here is the only information that is not included on the CD. But everything else, all of the other text that you find on the pages in this book is actually included. So what do people think? How would you catalog this? Would you choose a record type A, a book record, a record type I, the non-musical sound recording? Thoughts? And I know it's hard when you're only seeing a few pages from a book, right? It's a lot easier when you have the entire item, but even then it can be challenging. So Lisa's saying the pictures in this seem pretty important. So Lisa's leaning toward type A. Oh, Jenny asks, did I actually listen to the entire, oh, that was from the last one. And so I will say, like with this one, I did have to listen to the CD a little bit more than with some other items. Again, library assistant, I'm not sure who that is, says A, since the book has extra important info. Anyone else? So this is one that I think with the mentors we did decide that this seemed, it was fine to use a type A record. This did seem to qualify where the text seems quite important. The fact that there is a little bit of supplemental information there at the end that's not included on the CD. So we would go ahead and catalog this one as a type A record. So let me get to the end of that. So let's move on to some other examples and ones that actually have music. So sing-alongs and then read-alongs with music. And we can have different combinations of these. And I think these are the ones that can get the trickiest, because we can have a read-along with text that's set to music. We can have items where it's a story and then there are songs that somebody already mentioned, and then we can have items that are kind of full-out sing-alongs, where the text itself is a song. So let's look at some of these examples. So we'll start with what I think is probably the easiest of these different combinations, and that is the sing-along where the text itself is a song. So if we look at the item, a hole in the bottom of the sea, we actually find that the lyrics of the song are treated as text, but then in a picture book format. Let me flip, and that way you can actually see here. So it kind of looks like, if you just open up the book, it kind of looks like it might be a picture book. But if you look at the title page, well, I guess it's not even quite clear from the title page. It doesn't specifically say that it's a song, but if you I can't remember if there is, when we get to if you look at the back of the book, that's right, you'll actually see that the book includes musical notation, and so it becomes a little bit more apparent that the text is actually a song. So here we go. So, right, the song is A Hole in the Bottom of the Sea. We have the musical notation, the lyrics, but it's been placed in picture book format. So in this case, again, we would go ahead and select record type J, because it does seem like it really is a song. There is a little bit of information at the very end of the book about blue holes, but it still seemed like the main idea is this is kind of a songbook. And so we still, with the mentors, we still thought that this would be a type J record, okay? Now here we have an example of a story plus songs. So where both the book and the CD include a story, and that there might also be some songs included on the CD. So we've got Chicken Joe Forgets Something Important. The book includes the story of Chicken Joe along with lyrics of, and then there's some songs included on the CD, and the book includes the lyrics for those songs. So the CD itself contains the story of Chicken Joe Forgets Something Important, a bunch of songs. It also has a short video about the band, and as well as the original Chicken Joe song. So let me show you some images. So here's the cover, and it even says story and songs. But when we look at it, and it really is, the Chicken Joe Forgets Something really does end up being a story. And it's not until we get to the back of the book that then we see the lyrics to some songs. And when we look at, here's a image of the information about the CD. So we can even see that first item, Chicken Joe Forgets Something. So that's the story, and then it's followed by a number of songs on the CD. So with this one, we thought that it did seem more like a type record, even though there is that music. It's more that the songs that are included then are supplemental information or supplemental components, but really the main item or the main component for this particular item is the story of Chicken Joe forgets something important. Does that seem clear? Are there questions about this one?
Can you go back to the little outline screen about this?
Yeah. This screen?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Anna, were we intending to we were going to post this PDF up on the website too, weren't we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry about writing down this information. We'll post the PDFs and also working on some cheat sheets and stuff like that. So there'll be some information that you can get on the Sage website to help work through all of this stuff.
I was wanting to see it because I thought it might help me when you described why you chose I.
Uh-huh.
And you said it's because the story seemed like it was the most important part of like the songs were kind of an extra added on.
Right.
Okay.
And especially compared to that last example where, right, that was really like the whole thing, was really a song, right? Whereas here it feels a lot more like the songs are something added on. But the main thing is that the kids are going to be listening to the story of Chicken Joe and kind of following along in the book with that story, and then at the end they get these bonus songs.
Okay, so could you say that in this case you wouldn't have, you could get the story and everything you really needed that was most important without having the CD?
Right, you could, like, right, that the if the CD happened to be missing, it wouldn't be like this. The book would still be useful, right, in terms of the story of Chicken Joe.
Okay. All right, thanks.
But of course, you know, again, if the CD went missing, then we would obviously have to change the record type to a type A, because then it's the book, right, the physical book itself that that becomes important. Whereas here, even though we're saying it's the CD, because we've chosen a type I record, what we're saying is the non-musical part of the sound recording, again, the story of Chicken Joe, is more important than the songs that have been added on, right? That if somebody were to pick up just the CD, the main thing would be listening to the story. They probably wouldn't just be picking up the CD to listen to these songs that the band, I forget what the name of the band is, Trout Fishing in America is the band that performs the songs on the CD, and it's not likely that someone is going to pick up the CD just to listen to the songs by Trout Fishing in America. And if we look at, let me go back to this, it says, music CD, in addition to narrating their story, the internationally renowned duo Trout Fishing in America performs 11 songs on the accompanying CD. So it's already kind of framed here as though the story itself is the most important and certainly more important than the songs. Even though, right here we have an example where there are quite a few songs included on that CD. Does that make sense? Or did anyone feel that, like, oh, still would maybe not make that choice of a record type I?
I think it makes sense. That was helpful to hear all that.
Yeah, very helpful. And I think what we're looking at right now is choosing the primary type. We're going to include information in the record eventually that mentions this music component. So at this point, we're just choosing the primary type. It's not like music's going to be ignored on the record.
Right. Thanks for adding that. Yeah, we'll get to that. Right. So it's good that we're seeing that there are a lot of different elements or a lot of different components to this record. But again, we're just trying to determine what that primary component is so we can choose the record type. And then we'll have to worry about making sure that all of this other stuff gets accounted for as well. So let's go ahead and move on. So here we have another example, and in this case where the text is set to music. And for this one, this is a little tricky. This probably would be a record type I, but as we'll see, it very may well be that, you know, if you chose a record type J, it wouldn't be completely unreasonable to do so. So in this particular case, we've got the book and CD would contain the same text, but but this CD may contain additional musical tracks. With the Carnival of Animals, what we have is a series of verse set to an orchestral composition. And interestingly enough, so the title of the book or the item is the Carnival of Animals, and that is actually the title of the orchestral composition. So the verse was created or was written, if I recall, it was that the person who wrote the verse was inspired by the orchestral composition and then kind of put some words to that music. Each track on the CD then is a reading of one verse followed by one piece of Saint-Saëns' composition. And then the CD also contains, I think it's the last track, the full orchestral composition. Let me just show you some images of this. So here we have it, the title. So if you look at the book itself, the pages of the book, you can see that it feels just like a book of verse. And then there's some information about the musician and the writing of this particular orchestral piece. And then here we have this CD with a listing of the tracks. And so the tracks are broken down. So then it's basically like each page of the book, again, is a different verse. And so then the tracks correspond to each of those separate verses. So again, this is one of the trickier ones. We did decide that I seemed most appropriate, but we were still kind of, it could go either way. What do others think about this one?
I think the I type seems appropriate since it said the verses were read. And so it wasn't sung, even though there's a music component. The verses themselves seemed non-musical. And that was the main
Yeah, and the fact that
component.
it's verse and not, right, these aren't actually lyrics, right? It is actually verse. And I think that was some of what went into our decision-making process, right? The fact that it's verse as opposed to lyrics.
Isn't that a pretty old piece of music and pretty famous?
Yeah.
And what I would wonder is if the verses were inspired by the music, maybe the music is the most important thing.
It was in this case that the verse was inspired by the music, and I think that was what you just said. There is kind of one of the strongest arguments for, okay, well, it really does sound like the music is more important since it was the inspiration for the whole thing, and so, right, maybe it is better to select a type J record. And again, right, this is one of those things where it's kind of up to the, a decision of the cataloger at that point in time, what you're feeling to be the primary component. And again, we went back and forth on this one, trying to figure this out. So it's not, we kind of came to the decision that, okay, let's go with I, but it wasn't okay, 100%, we're absolutely sure that this should be a tie record.
Was there something in particular that tipped you in the direction of the I versus the J?
I think again, as I was saying, because it's verse as opposed to lyrics, and it's like a reading when you actually listen to the CD. It's a reading of the verse with kind of that musical accompaniment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But again, it's kind of tricky because, this wasn't, I think had this been something that had been written as a song, then with lyrics, then it would be much easier to say, okay, yeah, that should be J. But because and in particular for this item, so the creation of this item in this manifestation was that, who was the author? Jack Preletsky. He was the one that then came up with the verses, right? So in some respects, this is his, right, his composition. He's sort of the author of this. And if we consider him to be the author of this particular manifestation, then we're more likely to prioritize the verse over the music.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really helpful to go through all of that. Really helpful.
Okay.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Oh, great. It looks like Lisa has a question. Was any of the score printed in the book? And I'm trying to remember here. Let me see if I have it. Oh, yes, I have the item here. I don't think so. No. It's just the verse, and then it goes directly to that, to the note to parents and teachers. There's no musical score whatsoever. So, the book, like if you look at the book, it really does, it could just look like a picture book.
Thank you, Anna. That would have been everything. All these little questions and stuff really does help to narrow down how we choose it. And like Beth said, read it. They didn't sing it. And then with not having any actual, where you can copy the music, you know, with an instrument, that it keeps the book from being musical, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for the comment. So let's so I think that's it for the examples that I have. Let's move on to step 3. And let me just say that, like, with the next session, we can go over some more complicated examples if that's helpful to people as well. But let's move on to step 3. I know we've probably gone over our time. Here, this is where it stays complicated through this whole process, let me tell you. So right now, in terms of step 3, I just want to go over some quick basics. So one of the things is to note is, now that we've selected what we think would be the best record type, now the issue is seeing if that record type is even available, right? So if the correct record type is not available for import, then you probably should contact the mentors, and then we can, either someone will need to create a record, or it might be possible that, you know, when we look at it more fully, that maybe it is actually one of those other record types. So the best thing, contact the mentors if the record type that you've determined is not actually available for import. Now, if it is available for import, there still is probably going to be some work that you need to do on the record, because generally these records tend not to be complete. There will be little components that need to be added. So let's go through some of the things that need to be added and modified. And let's start with the easy stuff, right? There's some things that are kind of specific to Sage. We add the 245, the GMD. So in the 245 field, we would want to have everyone insert the subfield H, and we've created, here we're creating a new GMD, book with CD, and this is one that we would want you to use regardless of the type of record that you choose. So even if you're choosing an I or a J, which seems to be more of a CD with a book, just for uniformity's sake, we would like just to have the one GMD of book with CD. And then to help with the searchability of read along, since a lot of times, in some cases you might find in the title something like, you know, a read along, but in some cases you won't. So we thought it would be good to actually have to add a 690, which is a local subject added entry, to enter that into the add that to the record. And here we've chosen this particular format of read along as 2 words and no hyphen. And then with the 999 field, it's important to add both the subfield E's for the audiobook CD and the book as well. Now, if the item can include significant music, then you may need to also add a subfield E, music CD. So for instance, if you choose record type J, it might be important to then also include music CD. But even, I mean, I think that perhaps with the Carnival of Animals, that last example that we had, that's one, even though we said, okay, well, we're choosing a type I record, but here we might also add a subfield E, because there was, because like we have the whole orchestral piece in there, so that might be something that you want to add as well. You know, all of this helps with making sure that because the read along has these multiple components, because there's the CD, because there's a book, having both of these in the 999 just helps make sure that the item is coming up under both categories when people are doing searches. So elements that you want to then verify and that you might need to add or modify. So there's the fixed length data fields, the 008, 006, and the 007. Again, those are very complicated. We'll talk a lot more about those next time. You'll also want to check the 300 field and then the 33Xs. So let's start with probably the easiest one, which is the 300 field. If you are choosing a type I or a type J record, where then, right, what we've said is that the CD is the primary item, we want to make sure that in the 300 field that the description is primarily for the CD. So in the subfield A, we have the audio disc, and it's that the book gets included in a subfield E. Whereas if we are choosing a type A record, where the book then is the primary item, we want to have the 300 field showing the book is the primary component in that subfield A for the description, and then the CD added on as the subfield E. The other thing, and I don't know how familiar everyone is with the 33Xs, just keep in mind that there's a list, since all of this is standardized, like the precise wording that you need to have in the 33Xs that you can find on the SAGE website. Here I'm just of an example of the type I record and a type A record. One, to highlight that you need to make sure with these read-alongs that you have a set of 33Xs for each of the components. So one for the CD and then one for the book as well. And that what happens is, if you, depending on the type of record, the order of those components is going to vary. So you can see in these two examples how with the record type I, that first 336 is for the spoken word. So for the CD, and in the record type A, the first 336 is for the text. And then you'll see that then the first 337 for the record type I is again for the CD, and the first 338 is for the CD. And then with the record type A, the first 337 is again for the book. You'll probably notice as well that in both of these examples, there are 3 336s where there are only 2 337s and 2 338s. That's because and you've probably seen this before with picture books for the 336 field, that because there are so many images, that a lot of times what gets included for the 336s is that still image entry, and so you'll see that in both of those records. And then let's see. So oops. That didn't, it looks like something got cut off here. That's odd. Sorry about that. It should be showing the 008 in the MARC record here. But nevertheless, what I wanted to point out with the 008 is that that will always be present in a record, and it gets automatically generated. So if you've chosen a type A record, then the 008 will reflect that. if you've chosen a type I record, that will also be reflected, and that will end up looking different from a type A record. And let me show you some examples here. So you can see in the 008, we have a 008 for type A, type I, and type J records. If you look at that first half, that is basically, you'll see that all of that is the same. That's 160930 all the way through CAU, right? That's all the same because that's basically that publication information, like publication date and publication location. So all of that stays the same for the, whether it's a type A, I, or J record. It's really this this second half that changes, and all I want you to see here is that variation. Again, in the next session, we'll go over what all of this actually means. For the moment, I just want you to see how different they look based on the record type. So the 006, I don't know how familiar everyone is with the 006. Again, the 008 is going to be automatically generated, so it will be there. And what the 008 is doing is it's providing information about what has been determined to be the primary component of that item. The 006 then provides information about any of the accompanying material. So for read-alongs, you will, because there are multiple components, you will always need at least one 006. And that might be included in the record that you import. It might not be included. And again, because it's providing information about the accompanying material, it will vary depending on the record type. So if the record type is a type I, then the 008 field was providing information about the CD, and so the 006 needs to provide information about the book. For record type A, the 008 is providing information about the book, so the 006 needs to provide information about the CD. And the same with a record type J. And so here are some examples of that. And again, you can see how different they look because they're describing different elements. But again, if we look at the type I and the type J record, because both of those, in both of those cases, the 006 is describing the book, those should look the same. I actually might have typed that wrong. I think those should actually look the same, but I need to verify that. It's hard to remember all of the different little elements in these entries, but in general, that will look pretty much the same for a type I and type J record. For the 007, that's providing information specifically about the CD or the sound recording. And so that should also be the same regardless of the type of record. So whether it's an A record, an I record, or a J record, the 007 should always look the same. And again, and I know a lot of you have already worked with 007s, and we do have the physical characteristics wizard in Evergreen to make it easier to create those. We don't have anything like that for the 006, and that's why in that next session, we're going to have to really go over how that is, the different components of that and how that actually gets created. So I just want to finish up here and show you an example of, here we come back to A Child's Introduction to Poetry. This is the mark record for this particular item. And I've highlighted some things here. we see the 008 on the left side. We see the 33 X's, and we have a 999. On the right side of the screen, what I've done is I've put that 008 in there, but then added in a 006 and a 007. So neither of those were included in the original MARC record here. I've made an adjustment to, or a modification to the 245. It looks like this one, so this was a record that was already in the Sage catalog, and here we see that Kit was used as the GMD originally, but we of course want you to be using book with CD as the new GMD for read-alongs. And then in the 300 field, let's see, so we've got the description of the book, and then with the sound disc or CD as the subfield E. And then we can see that in the original record, there was only one set of 33Xs that was actually included. So here I've provided the full set of 33Xs that would need to be in the record. In the inclusion of a 690 for the read-along, and then again making sure that in the 999 we have both book and audiobook CD included there. So that is the end of today's session. Sorry that took so long. And then in the next session, we'll look more closely at 006, 008, just those fixed length data fields in general, and trying to understand what that's all about and how they work. Any questions, comments, requests?
This is Beth. I just have something to add, Anna. The benefit of the extra 33X fields is that multiple icons will display in the catalog for the different types that are represented. So you'll see both a book icon and a audiobook icon if you use the multiple 33X fields.
Yes, thank you for adding that, and that's very helpful to patrons, obviously, when they can see, and catalogers as well, when you can see right away the the little audiobook icon and the book icon as well. And we do want both of those to appear on the record. Hopefully this wasn't all too much to digest for this first session. Certainly feel free to send along questions between now and the next session. We haven't set the date for the next one, but there will be time to kind of think about all of this, gather your thoughts, come up with questions. Some of you may even have some examples that you already know have been frustrating you. Feel free to send those along. We can work on those in the next session as well. And I as well will try and get some of the cheat sheets and the PDFs for these slides posted to the website, so you can have that material as well before the next session. It'll be helpful, I think, to have all of this as we go into the next session.
Sounds good.
Do you
Thanks,
know when
Anna.
the next session's going to be? Do you know when the next session will be?
Beth, do you have any thoughts on what would be a good time frame of, like how long should we wait? We probably shouldn't wait too long, but we don't want to wait so long that everyone forgets what we've started.
Yeah, good point. I think it's up to you, Anna.
and I know we have the holidays coming up, right? So it probably is going to be hard, even if like 2 weeks from now is basically Thanksgiving, right? So that won't work. We might have to
Is Thanksgiving the
do,
22nd?
I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't looked that up yet.
Yeah, so that would be 3 weeks from now, would be Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, so we might try and do it then 2 weeks from now. Otherwise, I guess it would be a month from now. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the upgrade.
Oh,
Scheduled
right.
for the
That's
14th, which means the 15th would be the day after the upgrade.
We're probably best waiting till after Thanksgiving when things have calmed down a little bit.
But what we could do is put the cheat sheets and this PDF up on the website, so they'd all be
Yeah,
resources for folks that are trying to work on these in the meantime.
yeah, exactly. So that it sounds like we're leaning a little bit more to 1 month from now as the next session. But then we'll make all of this available to you. In the meantime, again, please feel free to send any questions that you have in the meantime, examples, anything that you're wondering about, and then I guess, well, if there aren't any other comments or questions, I guess we will call it quits for today.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks everyone for coming.